Hulk Hogan spent 40 years as one of the most famous men on the planet, and when he died, we all thought we understood what happened. But what the FBI found inside his Clearwater mansion after his death is something nobody saw coming, and the people who know exactly what it is are not talking. Police officials and nurses who were present that morning have been contacting his own daughter in private, putting their careers on the line, because what happened in that house was never meant to come out, and nothing about how this legend died was as simple as the headline said it was.
The morning of July 24th. On the morning of July 24, 2025, Hulk Hogan was found unresponsive in his Clearwater home. 3 weeks earlier, he had appeared on Fox & Friends to promote Real American Freestyle, the wrestling league he had been building with his longtime friend Eric Bischoff. He walked out with a cane and looked noticeably thinner than he had in years. At the end of the segment, unprompted, he looked into the camera and said, "I need to take a nap, brother. I am totally worn out." Everyone in the room laughed. Nobody took it seriously. Looking back at that moment now, knowing that within 3 weeks he would be dead and federal agents would be pulling apart his home, that throwaway line about needing a nap reads less like a joke and more like a man who already knew something was wrong and had no idea how wrong it was about to get. The day before he died, he posted on Instagram a beach towel printed with his own face, a can of his Real American beer resting in the towel's printed hand, and a caption that read, "Beach Day sponsored by Brotherhood." Even Kevin Nash, one of his oldest friends in the business, said they had been texting 2 days earlier and that Hogan seemed energized, while Nick Hogan, his son, said his father had been counting the days until his wife Sky came home from her wellness retreat. Nobody reading that post had any reason to treat it as a farewell. By the next morning, it was the last thing he ever said to the world. Sky placed the 911 call at 9:51 in the morning. 3 words: he stopped breathing. Not a collapse, not a chest-clutching seizure, just a man who had simply and quietly stopped breathing. And by the time she found him, there was nothing left to do. Paramedics worked the scene and transported him to Morton Plant Hospital, where he was pronounced dead at 11:17 that morning. The cause was listed as acute myocardial infarction, certified by his primary care physician and with no autopsy performed. By the time the public had processed the news, the body had been cremated and the physical evidence with it. The house was still there, and what investigators found when they walked through the front door did not match a natural death in almost any detail that mattered. But before we get to what they found, you need to understand one thing that happened 2 months ago, because without it, nothing else in this story makes sense.
The surgery nobody talked about. On May 14, 2025, Hulk Hogan underwent a 4-level anterior cervical discectomy infusion, a procedure in which surgeons enter the neck, remove damaged discs across 4 vertebral levels, and fuse the bones together to relieve pressure on the spinal nerves. It is among the most complex operations in spine surgery, and at 71 years old, with more than 25 prior surgeries behind him, everyone in his inner circle understood the risk. What they did not understand, at least not publicly, was what Hogan himself began to suspect in the weeks after he came home. Medical professionals who reviewed the case after his death focused on a specific concern that never made it into the headlines: the phrenic nerve, the structure that drives the diaphragm and controls the body's ability to breathe, runs directly through the surgical field in a multi-level anterior cervical procedure. Damage to it does not always announce itself on the operating table. It can surface weeks later quietly as a respiratory failure, with no dramatic presentation and no warning signal that someone nearby would recognize as an emergency. The result is not a heart attack the way people picture one. The result is a person who simply stops breathing. That is exactly how Sky described what she found. And here is the detail that changes everything. In the weeks between that surgery and his death, Hogan had started making calls he had never made before, to people in a world very far removed from professional wrestling. And what those calls reveal about what he suspected is the reason the FBI was inside that house in the first place. Who was he calling? and why change all the natural death claims. But before that, what exactly do you think the investigators found the moment they walked through his front door? This truth is more shocking than you think.
Hulk Hogan's gym was the room where he was most himself, and even through the surgeries and the recoveries and the seasons when he could barely move without pain, he went back to it. And his son Nick described him in his final months as more focused and disciplined in his training than at any previous point in his life, which is exactly what made what investigators found so difficult to explain. A room that had been used 2 days earlier had no business looking the way it did. Surfaces polished, weights arranged in geometric rows with the uniform spacing of deliberate placement rather than actual use. Floor mats without a single scuff mark, no water bottles, no towels. Someone had been in that gym before the 911 call was made, and whatever they were doing, it was not working out. One of the agents who walked through it reportedly described the space as eerily sterile, almost staged, and that word changed the way they looked at everything else. Then came the security system. Hogan's Clearwater property was equipped with a layered, redundant surveillance network covering every entry point and interior common area, with backup systems designed to hold even through power disruptions. But this entire network had reportedly been disabled from inside the house before the 911 call was placed. There were no signs of forced entry anywhere on the property, which meant whoever disabled it was already inside and already trusted. Local law enforcement looked at both of those details and made a call that tells you everything about how seriously they took the scene. They escalated to the FBI, who arrived with cybercrime specialists, digital forensics units, and smart home analysts whose mandate was to reconstruct every movement inside that property in the hours before the 911 call. They confirmed the shutdown had been performed from inside. They could not confirm who did it. But when they pulled Hogan's phone records and communications, they found something in the 3 days before his death that made the sterile gym and the disabled cameras look like the least alarming part of the whole picture.
3 days before he died, Hulk Hogan received a late-night phone call, and Sky Dicey's account of how he responded to it is one of the most specific and unsettling details in this entire case. She had never, across all their time together, seen him react the way he reacted to that call. She watched him listen in silence for almost a full minute, say almost nothing in response, and end the call pale and visibly shaking, with the kind of expression she described as genuine animal fear, the type that cannot be performed or controlled. This was a man who had survived the public collapse of a 24-year marriage, financial ruin, and a depression he later admitted had pushed him close to the edge of not continuing. He had come back from all of it without ever looking afraid. After this call, when she pressed him, he deflected with the practiced precision of someone who had long ago learned to keep certain things entirely sealed. Investigators traced the call and ran straight into a wall. The number was unlisted. The signal had been routed through a chain of servers across multiple countries, each layer stripping away the one before it, and the operation required both technical sophistication and deliberate, premeditated effort. This was not a misdial, and it was not someone reaching out casually. Someone had taken careful, layered steps to guarantee that the origin of that conversation could not be identified, and done it with enough precision that even the FBI's cybercrime division could not reach the end of the trail. The contents of the call are classified within the federal investigation. What investigators did establish is that the call had been placed with deliberate technical sophistication, consistent, according to sources familiar with the investigation, with someone who had reason to know what Hogan had been quietly building for months, and reason to want him aware that they knew. Something that, until the second forensic sweep of that mansion, nobody outside his own private circle knew existed. But before we get to the room, you need to understand one more piece that connects all this, because the will he signed 2 years before his death and what it did to his own daughter is what ultimately explains why the body camera footage from that morning is still sealed today.